On the F1 news today, Nico Rosberg has some strong words towards Lando Norris after his disastrous crash in Canada. This also brings into question whether Lando Norris is a championship-worthy type of driver. What is going on with George Russell's contract with Mercedes and why is Toto stalling? Will this trigger silly season? And finally, is Ferrari trying to get rid of Fred Vasseur? And as always, if you like this kind of content, don't forget to like and subscribe. So after the Canadian Grand Prix, Nico Rosberg had something to say about Lando Norris's performance. He had, and I quote, said, "Lando, as you mentioned, it's been his Achilles heel this year, hasn't it? His mental fragility, his doubts, and they came to the fore again now in Montreal. It's just when the pressure is highest, there are these little mistakes that creep in. They creep in qualifying, where in Q3 he made 2 major mistakes on 2 important laps, which meant he only had 7th place on the grid with one of the fastest cars. And in the heat of the moment, in the most critical moment, where he was trying to pass his championship rival, he did a very strange misjudgment, just driving into the back of him." I mean, for anyone watching this Grand Prix, it was so strange to see Lando do that. It really does make everyone question, is he in fact championship worthy material? You can't be making these kind of mistakes in a season. It doesn't matter if he finishes behind Oscar in that particular race, because it's such a long season. You just want to try and get as many points as you can. And all of that was decided in qualifying, where he qualified 7th and Oscar was further down the road. Those kind of moves, I just don't see the logic behind it. It kind of comes across very desperate. And I can't see how other teams look at Lando's performance, particularly with his stint with Oscar, and question whether he is a number 1 driver. And that's something Lando needs to start thinking about, in my opinion, because I feel like he's at the same point where Daniel Ricciardo was when he joined McLaren, and Lando was that young, hungry driver. And what Lando did to Daniel then made Daniel one of those drivers who had to kind of go back to the back of the grid. And that could be Lando's future. I don't think any of the top teams would see that. We've seen Christian Horner mention it openly in Drive to Survive, that he would choose Oscar over Lando. And I'm sure the other teams would think the same. So either Lando really pulls up his socks and pushes ahead and tries to recoup all those points and put in some performances where he shows consistency, just as Oscar's done. Otherwise, he just needs to try and find drives where he just makes lots of money and then leaves as, you know, a Grand Prix winner opposed to a Formula One champion. So it'll be quite interesting to see how this season pans out, because this will also have an impact, I think, on silly season. And that brings us on to George Russell's contract. I think if you look at the top 5 people in the championship, I think George Russell definitely stands out as one of the best drivers for the season. He has been consistent. He has performed to the car's ability, and he just hasn't made any mistakes. And I think he has done everything to demonstrate that he deserves a contract. But Toto, being Toto, he is stalling, and he is not really putting pen to paper. And I think he's holding out for Max Verstappen. He's holding out for a Red Bull implosion such that he can then swoop in and get Max into Mercedes. And is that fair on George? Absolutely not. But was it fair on Carlos Sainz? Absolutely not as well. I thought Carlos was slightly better than Charles in race trim while he was at Ferrari. I would like to hope that something comes about, but this is what Toto had to say. It's not like there's some politics. He's just taken the place that he merits and deserves. The ambience in the team is great, and we've agreed on some kind of timeline when we want to settle these things. With the triple headers getting out of our way in one race after the other now in June and July, but we're going to get there. We'll find out, I guess, around the summer break whether George is going to stay with Mercedes or whether something else is going to happen. And even George himself, he said that he has no hard feelings, which I think is understandable. And it's the same thing as Carlos. He said it was pretty understandable that Lewis took his seat when a 7-time world champion comes by. Why wouldn't Ferrari sign him? So the same way Max is a generational talent, I think George kind of understands that. So this is what he had to say. There haven't been any hard feelings with any of the talks that are going around, especially around Max. Like I said numerous times, why wouldn't teams be interested in Max? If every driver had no contracts for next year, Max would be number 1 for every single team, and that's understandable. But ultimately, there are 2 seats for every race team. I knew if I continue to perform as I'm doing, my positions would not be under threat whatsoever. So I feel in a good place. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if George is feeling a slight bit nervous given what happened to Carlos at Ferrari. I think those kind of moves can happen and it can shock the whole sort of grid. I mean, that's where silly season would start if Max announces he's moving to Mercedes and now George has to scramble for a seat for next year. And we're starting to see that amongst the likes of Alonso. So Alonso has been seen in the Alpine garage, and that kind of speculation must mean that there is sort of some moving parts and people are hedging. Andy Cowell, who is the team principal of Aston Martin, said, "I'm happy for Fernando to wander into any garage. He knows a lot of people up and down the pit lane. I'm also happy with the fact that he is contracted to us next year and hopefully will stay with us long term as an ambassador with us." So we're starting to see that maybe there are potentially some moves that could happen. Max moves to Mercedes, and then George moves to Aston Martin. Alonso moves to Alpine, and then we don't know what's going to happen with Lando Norris. If Lando Norris, performs poorly this year, then he might look to just move and try and reassert himself as a number one driver somewhere else. So let's see. It'll be quite an interesting season from the driver's perspective and where they'll be in 2026. Finally, I want to end with what's going on with Ferrari. I think this is just a clown show, to be honest. Vasseur hasn't really been in the seat for very long. I think these team principals need to have at least a 5-year term. I think to really show that they have demonstrated change and they've done all the things that they could possibly do to get the team to where they want it to be. And it's quite hard to get to that kind of position because when you sign on new staff, sometimes their gardening leave is 1 year or, even longer. So you can't necessarily see the changes come in immediately. Even when they start, it'll take maybe another 6 months, maybe a year. And then when you throw in changing regulations like we're having next year, 3 years is just not enough. I think it'll be quite sad to see him go because I think we need to see what 2026 comes about, because I think Matteo Binotto did a really good job. I just feel like he didn't need to be the team principal. He just needed to be like a technical officer. He needed someone to do all the media and all the politics, but he was actually a really sound engineer. And I think in this case, this guy is a good leader. He's just trying to get his team together such that they will perform. And we can see here in this article that the Italian media have suggested that all is not well behind the walls of Maranello, but replacing Fred Vasseur would merely restart a cycle that the Scuderia has been trapped in for the most of the last 2 decades, which is absolutely correct. I think it'll be the wrong thing to remove him at this moment of time. And reports suggest that the Canadian, Australian and British Grand Prix could be critical for Vasseur's future as he eyes a contract extension beyond the end of the season. So I just don't know who will actually replace him. Who is there in the market right now? Toto will not leave Mercedes. And we've also heard that Christian Horner says his heart and soul is in Red Bull, so he will not leave. And because they don't have a base in the UK, a lot of these team principals have young families or they have their whole lives surrounded in that sort of area. Why would they leave? I just can't see it unless they make a new base in the UK. So unless they do what Racing Bulls have done and open up a new office such that you can hire some of the people from the UK, from the other teams, and that will add to performance. But I just can't see who they would hire. Andreas Seidel is the only other team principal that comes to mind who may be available. But outside of that, I think they're better off keeping Fred Vasseur. And in all this mess, there's been rumours that have been spreading around Charles Leclerc and his future at Ferrari. He says, I have no idea where this is coming from, so yeah, I'd rather just ignore it. But I've never said anything of this in the last few races. And this is quite common with the Italian media. There's clearly someone trying to start this narrative, and then they'll start getting the drivers involved. Very soon you'll hear that Lewis is also unhappy, so we'll see. Anyways, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you don't mind, don't forget to like and subscribe. And with that, thank you.